Bill number 5, obviously. Talk about why the Nintendo Entertainment System console failed, period. Here we go, here we go. So why did the NES fail? The Nintendo Entertainment System failed because of design flaws. The BCR rolling light mechanism of the NES led to its problems over time. The design wears connectors pins out quickly, easily become dirty, results in difficulties with the NES regarding game packs. Nintendo's design styling for USC release was made deliberately from other game consoles. Why did Nintendo discontinue NES? Another good question. This is the reason why this is the same reason I showed you that in my other video earlier, over a couple hours ago. This is the reason why they discontinued it pretty much. Let's see why else it failed. Um, what replaced the NES? That's a good question too, as well. It was succeeded in 1990 by the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo System Entertainment System in 1990. Now, what is Nintendo's most failed console? With the banal popularity of the Wii console, Nintendo eventually needed to find a way to outdo it. The company's next console release, however, fell drastically short. The Wii U was one of the company's worst performing consoles, despite having all those great games, which they had a lot of great games for the Wii U. But anyways, next to the Virtual Boy, as reported by Nintendo. All right, let me look why it flopped. That's what Super. That's when the NES console, Entertainment System console looks like. Now, what happened to the NES, Internal Entertainment System, obviously? As a decade of production, the NES was formally discontinued on August 14, 1995, Leo season. By the end of its run, more than 60 million NES units have been sold throughout the world. How much did the NES cost in today's money? And the NES had reached a price of $108.99, which works out to $458.58 in today's dollars on eBay. Kick Ron, I'm not paying that much for NES. Huh. That cost too much. Oops. It's cost too much. Sorry about that, guys. The site just acted up. Briefly. I think I clicked the button, obviously, but yeah, that's the reason why Nintendo uh NES console flopped and it failed. And I showed you in the first part of it why it failed. Guys, give me a second. See what's on the console. I had to look up. But I was just checking my screen, obviously. See why the Super Nintendo 64 succeeded. Here we go. Super Nintendo. Yeah, I know. Forgot the other letter. Yeah, I know. It's okay. Why the Super Nintendo 64 succeeded. Okay, guys. This is why the Super Nintendo 64 succeeded. The Nintendo 64 received acclaim from critics. Reviewers praised the console's advanced 3D graphics and gameplay while criticizing the lack of games on G4 Tech's TV's filter. The Nintendo 64 was brought up to #1 by registered users. What made the Super Nintendo so successful? That's for the Super Nintendo, pretty much. Keep the topic short. Let's read this paragraph, and I'll go back to Super Nintendo 64 information. Super Nintendo 64 information in a minute. This rich in variety library of classic titles crafted by rich developers were already at the peak of their creative powers, what makes the Super Nintendo beloved console. Even after all this time, while the NES and Wii sold more units total the 16-bit power that already has super lineup of software. So that's the reason why Super Nintendo. The other reason why Super Nintendo succeeded as well. Keep that topic short, but anyways. What made the N64 so special? The N64, with the 64 bits power, Super Nintendo 64 players can explore breakthrough 3D worlds that explode with color, sound. What made the Nintendo 64 so successful? Above all, the Nintendo 64 was a special social console with its full control ports, sleepovers, and hangouts with a large group of friends. Became more fun. Previous gaming consoles only had 2 controller ports. Why was the Nintendo 64 so popular? While it certainly wasn't the first home console, it was the first one to perfect it. The simple construction, ease of use, and high quality games, it was everything the predecessors hadn't been, and that was by design. Nintendo dedicated itself to avoiding the mistakes that had lead to the video game crash. This was one of the games right here too. This made Super Nintendo 64 very popular as well. What made Super Mario 64 so successful? Super Mario 64 set many precedent for 3D platforms such as most influential video games. This game is known for its non-linear open freedom, which has been acclaimed by video game developers and journalists. You know what? My field, obviously, being a journalist, obviously. How did the Nintendo 64 change the world? Here we go. The Nintendo 64 wasn't Nintendo's best or most popular system, but it represented a shift in gaming philosophy. Its influential console helped popularize the storyline-driven graphics, intensive game model that is still used by more game developers to this day, even years later. While the Nintendo 64 more powerful than PS1. The Nintendo 64's larger RAM and robust system capabilities made it possible for the console to show off more massive worlds in their games. Titles like The Legend of Zelda, Super Mario 64, Turok. That game Turok's also on PS4 as well. Yeah, so that was a Nintendo. Maybe that's playing Turok. That Turok game was a Nintendo game first. They didn't put it on PS4 and PS3 until years later. But anyways, and other well-known titles were made possible by the Nintendo 64 shared power that PS1 did not have the same power capabilities. Why was the Nintendo 64 so revolutionary? Introduction of 3D graphics, and the N64 was the first console to bring 3D graphics into mainstream gaming. Its powerful hardware allowed for immersive gameplay with detailed environments and lifelike characters. This paved the way for subsequent consoles to prioritize graphical capabilities. Okay. What was Nintendo 64 known for? Nintendo 64 was designed as a party machine with 4 control ports, just begging to get there with 3 friends to experience how astounding games like Mario Kart 64, Mario Party, and Donkey Kong 64 can blossom into a laugh-a-minute multiplayer gameplay marathons. Was Nintendo 64 obsolete? The production of the system in Japan in 2002 and 2003 worldwide as the GameCube launched. Why was Luigi removed from Mario 64? And that's a good question too. Roger was removed from the game in February 1996 due to memory limitations. Should have remained in the game, the levels would have been much simpler to compensate. Was the Nintendo 64 a success? The Nintendo 64 was discontinued in 2002 following the 2001 launch of the GameCube, having sold over 32 million units globally. The Nintendo 64 was critically acclaimed, and though it sold less than PlayStation, remained a strong position in the United States, but remained critically failed in Japan. Wow. You learn something new every day. You learn something new every day about these console wars. You know. Why was Nintendo 64 so good? The obvious reason why Nintendo 64 was good for families because it was the first of big consoles to create 4-player games where meant people can play at the same time, and yet some of the greatest games like Rave Race had multiplayer modes where they're only for 2 players. The Nintendo 64 had better graphics than PlayStation 1. That's where it gets tricky too as well, because everybody worries about the freaking graphics. On Nintendo 64, the graphics are smoother, and the pre-rendered cutscenes on the PS1 are done in-engine and were quite nice. Even though the PS1 version came out later, includes voice acting, some graphical tweaks, the Nintendo 64 graphics look better overall. 2016-2021. What does the 64 Nintendo stand for? 64-bit CPU. If you mean Nintendo 64, the great game console from the 1990s was called N64. Short 64 came from the fact it was powered by a 64-bit CPU at a time, which I already knew about that, obviously. 64-bit CPUs were uncommon. Was Nintendo 64 64-bit? Yes, it was. But why? It probably would tell you why. Why was Nintendo 64 discontinued? In summary, the Nintendo 64 had reached the natural end of its product life cycle due to its technological limitations and declining sales, all contributed to Nintendo's decision to cease its production by the early 2000s in order to focus developing newer and more competitive gaming hardware. Why was the Nintendo 64 considered a failure? This is probably one of the reasons. The Nintendo 64 didn't have a lot of units sold compared to the PS1, but more importantly, it didn't sell nearly as many games. PS1 sold 972 million games, and only Nintendo 64 sold 225 million. Wow. That explains a lot. October 26, 2019. Was Nintendo 64 or PS1 stronger? This where it gets tricky too. Again, the Nintendo 64 wins here. The PS1's running power paled compared to the Nintendo 64, at least on paper. The PS1 ran at 38.3 MES MIPs or 3008 CPU, while the Nintendo 64 ran NNC 43 VR 4300 CPU, MBIP R4 3300I base, and clocked at 93.75 megahertz. And the N64 was 3 times as fast as the PS1. When the Nintendo 64 become obsolete, this is where it gets tricky too. Nintendo 64 was discontinued in 2002 following the launch of its successor, the GameCube. The Nintendo 64 was critically acclaimed upon release and remains one of the most recognized video game consoles. What was the Nintendo 64 competitor? Interesting. The PlayStation, Saturn, and Dreamcast was the Nintendo 64's only mainstream competitors. Now it did 64 doubled the combined sales of Sega Saturn and Dreamcast. It was sole console other than the PlayStation this generation it was able to live to see its successor launch November 1st, 2022. Was Nintendo 64 more powerful? In terms of raw computing power, the Nintendo 64 was a more powerful system. However, in the real world, the PS1 games had better graphics and were in large scope than Nintendo 64 games, A bigger reason why this was final CD4 and PS1 used, as opposed to Nintendo 64 cartridges. What's the thing on the bottom on the Nintendo 64? Obviously, plugging in the extension port, the 64 DED allows Nintendo 64 to probably a 64 megabyte magnetic disk and expanded reversible data storage, real-time clock for library position game world design, and standard font and auto library for supported storage efficiency. Wow, the Nintendo 64 is so good. The Nintendo 64 person made in 3D worlds and controls of the console games in a way that PS would for years later. Including PS5 years later. Including the Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2. Yeah. But PS excelled in allowing for newer genres and methods of storytelling with increased disk capacity. What's C on Nintendo 64? C buttons. Each Nintendo 64 is riddled with 4 yellow C buttons on the right hand side of the controller. They are, as you can see right there, pretty much. They are up C button, down C button, right C button, left C button. The use of C buttons very beginning with most of you using the buttons as camera controls. What console was going to beat? Sony was going to beat Sega and Nintendo. The Sega Saturn and Nintendo 64 almost struggled against Sony newcomer the PlayStation, which ultimately ended Sega and Nintendo's console war. Okay, guys. How much Nintendo 64 when it was brand new? That's a good question too. $200. Wow. Okay, it was expensive. Couldn't afford that in that era either. In this era either. It has to be a frugal price if I get that too. That's if I want to get it. That's not well, that's by choice. I don't want to get it obviously, but if I had the choice to get Nintendo 64, if I had money then to get that then years ago, I probably got that too. But of course, too late for that. But anyways, far from Nintendo's most successful system, and not a failure. Nintendo 64 was priced at an ultra competitive $200 when it launched in 1996. I was 2 years old, so was Monte as well. Okay. Now I'm gonna show you why it failed, how it failed. Okay. Scrolling back up, guys. In a second. Guys, why did Super Nintendo 64 fail? With consumer attention, this is the reason why it's failed. Super Nintendo 64 has failed. With consumer attention divided between mobile gaming systems, Nintendo like it was behind the curve, and thus it was less appealing. PlayStation sold 102.49 million units during its life cycle, but Nintendo 64 didn't even sell half of that at close to 33 million units to April 8, 2022. Why did Nintendo 64 fail? After a strong launch year, the decision to use the cartridge format is said to have contributed to the diminished release pace at the higher price of games compared to competition, and thus Nintendo was able to maintain its lead in the United States even years later with the Nintendo Switch coming from 2017 and 2021 included, and Nintendo Switch 2 is coming out in March of next year included. So yeah, Nintendo's going to have a head start on PS5. The PS5 Pro is going to have a head start. So is Microsoft as well for us. Their new consoles for Unreal Engine 5 next month and Unreal Engine 6 next year as well. So once Nintendo gets the head start, Nintendo Switch 2 gets the head start on Xbox Series S and X, S digital, 1 terabyte digital, and Series X all digital comes out November 7th, and also the 2 terabyte Galaxy one Disc 1 comes out no more than Unreal Engine 5 and 6. When Unreal Engine 6 comes out next year, that's a wrap for Sony. No PS6, and you know why. Because all they're going to do is make the games multi-platform for the PS4 and the PS5 games on the PS6. And I told you in my last video, they're only making the multi-platform games for PS6. Nobody's listening right now. Nobody's listening right now. Anyways. Why did Nintendo 64 discontinue? However, the low input of new title and the expensive price of N64 games compared to the PlayStation, due to the latter was a cheaper or frugal is another way of saying it, obviously. Larger capacity optical disc. All the way to Nintendo losing their lead in the market in favor of Sony, probably Nintendo to switch to the optical disc for their reasons. What was the last game on Nintendo 64? Final first party games were the Bitsu no More on April 14, 2001 in Japan, Mario Party 3 on May 7, 2001 in North America. The final game license to be published for the system is the North American exclusive Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 on August 20 Rio season 2002. So that's the reason why it failed, guys. Okay, guys. So there you have it. Why didn't Super Nintendo 64 succeeded? Why did it fail? So there you have it. Why the Nintendo 64 succeeded and it failed. If you like my rambles and rants, leave a like on the video, obviously. If you like me roasting Henny for Capcom, obviously, and roasting Mr. Francis and Shannon Sharp and anybody else that I know falls to Michael Jordan and sports, falls to sport world and consports, come to my YouTube channels. I give you the content all the time. Because I made some shorts in the past few months on Raiders Power 8, also Raiders Power 8 nickname under it. And I made a lot of shorts on Rumble Hut 6 as well. And this is the channel I'm streaming on currently. But yeah, Roll Hutch 6, Roll Hutch Podcast nickname under it. Braves Power 8, nickname under it. And also Express vs. Sony Fan, Express vs. Sony Podcast nickname under it as well. Excuse me, come to my YouTube channel. If you like my rants and rants, leave a like on the video, obviously. Come to my YouTube channel and subscribe to me pretty much. I've been making bills for the past, almost a whole decade now, including last year too as well, in 2022 as well, and this year as well. A lot of content made this year. I made a lot of content this year talking about everything, about the console wars, the sport wars, and etc. And roasting Mr. Francis, roasting Mr. Sharp, and roasting Mr. Son as far as Capcom was concerned. If you like my rambles and rants about those topics, out of the sport wars and come to my YouTube channels. I'll give you the content every day pretty much. If I can, obviously, that's if I'm not busy, obviously. Make sure you follow me subscribe to me on YouTube. Follow me on Instagram. I check my Instagram every day pretty much. Add me on Facebook, follow me on Facebook. Add me on PSN, follow me on PSN. I'll add you as a close friend as long as you're not a troublemaker pretty much. And also add me on Twitch, follow me on Twitch. 3 of my 5 Twitch accounts I'm already a Twitch affiliate on as well. Got influenced the app pretty much as far as the streaming is concerned. Make sure you follow me on TikTok, Lil Queen 4. Okay, guys, I end the video right there. If you like my rambles and rants, and me talking about the console wars and sport wars, and roasting Mr. Sharp, roasting Mr. Francis, roasting Henny and Capcom, roasting Mr. Fan when it comes to Michael Jordan and all North American sports, come to my YouTube channel and I'll give you the smoke and dead of air and earth right now. It's okay, guys, I'll be right there. This is, yeah, this is.